we're going to be looking at how how traders can make use of Pan-Africanism, Pan-African payment and settlement systems. How you can do that from where you are around the continent, and to be able to help us with that, it already sounds like, okay, so wait a minute, what are we doing? Across currencies, across countries, how? Well, we're going to get into it. And Edward Nakitare is an international money transfer expert. If you've never seen one, we have one right here in the hot seat. If you want to know how an international money transfer expert looks like, you need to be tuned in now. And then also some of the things that he's going to tell us today, probably phenomenal, but we'll get into that conversation without much ado. Edward, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Very well. How are you?
Not bad. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room. Business has blown up around the continent over the last decade, and we've seen that folks who ordinarily would have to travel from point A to point B to then be able to transact business are now able to do that from the comfort of the countries where they're domiciled in, or even from the comfort of just behind your computer, depending on what it is that you trade. And so one of the big questions comes in terms of, so then how do we pay for these things? How do we receive money for our services or our goods? And so that's why you're here this morning, to be able to debunk some of those things for us. So we're very glad that you've done that. But as you come, we were going to welcome you to the Situation Room with a proverb. We're going to put you to work. And the CT goes to a different African country, so this is just apt, is it not? Every week, and he comes back with a basket full of proverbs from said country. So he's going to tell you where we are this week, and then he will give you the proverb, and you will then interpret that for us.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Let's do this.
Okay.
Well, the only African country on this continent that had two independents.
Okay.
Yes. One was simply declared. The people who considered themselves the leaders of that country determined that they were going to have their own self-rule and declared as such. It was called a UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence. And then the majority came up and said, folks, this is not really independence. We'd like our own. And a guerrilla war ensued for quite a while before that independence came about. Edward, which country do you think this is?
A guerrilla war ensued.
Yes, there are many countries in Africa where that happened, but there's one particular one where it happened. There are two independents. One was declared by a minority group.
Okay.
Who are white.
Is this Zimbabwe?
Good. You paid attention in class. This man paid attention in class. Yes. We are in the Republic of Zimbabwe, one of the richest countries on the planet. And yet, it represents the tragedy of Africa. I keep saying this because all that wealth, all that ability, all those resources, and yet the citizenry do not benefit from it as they should. They simply do not. The proverb, there is honey, but no bees.
Just because you don't see effort doesn't mean output is not there.
Yes. I think if you look at this gentleman's school reports, they'll tell us a good story that this man was good in school. Yes, clearly. Yes, that is it.
Fantastic. So I guess you've gotten off to a good start.
Yeah.
So then maybe you can debunk some of these things for us, and that, just give us an inroad, first of all, into how things have changed over the last many years, whereby, the traditional forms of then doing business and making and receiving payments was the rule of the roost. The rooster, that one, the rule of the roost. And that has changed today. Walk us through that transition, first of all, before we then get to then how we can do it today.
Right. So, and as long as there's been trade, as long as, civilizations have existed, trade has also existed. And as long as trade has existed, there's always been a medium of exchange, right? So I have to quantify the value of the items that you're giving me against what I'm giving you, right? And so we started out with barter trade, where my mangoes are worth, 10 mangoes are worth, say, 4 oranges. Or 50 cows are worth, a hat and something else. So we moved from that and we started looking at it's no longer very feasible to have a medium of exchange for barter trade, because maybe you have oranges and I don't want oranges, but I know somebody else who wants oranges. But then how do we strike a balance?
You meet at a market so that other people who have other goods
Exactly.
come with their goods.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so as the world began to grow, the market started becoming bigger and, extended beyond just where you would consider walking distance or a place where you could go to. So there was need for a medium of exchange, something that everyone would look at and say, this is worth this much, not necessarily the goods that you have, right? And we had shells. It's crazy when you look at some of the things right now. When you look back and wonder, it's crazy to imagine somebody went into the river or to the ocean and collected those things and said, "This is value."
Like a cowrie shell.
Yeah, like a cowrie shell. This is value for us.
But do you understand why it was given value?
Actually, no.
Because it was rare and it took effort to actually get them.
Not everybody could come across it.
Facts.
Yes.
Facts. But then I would also challenge that position and ask you, who assigns that value to the cowrie shell? Is it you who went in and looked for it? If I have never interacted with cowrie shells before...
Actually, the question is extremely valid.
Yeah.
If you haven't, and someone shows you something that you would consider useful to you, remember the barter trade...
Yeah.
I had to need something
Correct.
for whatever somebody else has to be valuable to me.
To me,
Yes.
yeah.
Same with cowrie shells.
Yes.
Even if it was just ornamental,
Yeah.
people considered it had value
Yeah.
because for the longest time, human beings have always understood how to make themselves look better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the cowrie shells did have a role.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was determined by the people who needed it.
Yeah.
And over time, that interest could spread.
Okay.
Yes.
So the underlying theme there was the perception, right?
Yes.
So the perception of the cowrie shells made you believe that it was of value, right? Because maybe somebody did tell you a story or did see somebody else with it, right? And I'm building into why that is very important, because that sets a foundation of where we are right now, right?
Right.
So then we proceeded over time and societies emerged, more people were on the earth, and we no longer could go in and just look for cowrie shells. So we had gold as a gold standard for it, so exchange of gold and silver. And then over that, now we said it's too bulky. The volume of trade became so massive. It was too bulky for you to be able to carry around, say, 5 kgs of gold to pay for something, right? So then there came in what we now understand as paper money. So you were told, for this one, say Kenya shilling, it's called a Kenya shilling. Its value is equivalent to X because it's backed by, say, a level of gold for some, for argument's sake. Again, perception, right? The large populace still didn't understand the value of this gold against the paper money, but they took it as a standard.
Yes.
It's like, this is what people are doing. Everyone is accepting it. Therefore, we're going to take it.
Okay.
So now fast forward to where we are right now. So you've transitioned over time from exchanging, and I like to, explain it this way, from exchanging physical hard currencies, right? Or physical items in exchange for services and goods. And now you're looking at, I'll just send you a transfer, right? And then we had the emergence of SWIFT, which now almost became the gold standard of bank legitimacy. That if a bank is on SWIFT, a bank has been given a SWIFT code, and they're able to initiate a transaction, then almost certain there is value backed by that transfer. Again, perception, isn't it? Now bring it now to our current scenario, and what happens is if I send you money, say from my phone, either via M-Pesa or from a bank to another bank, you never actually have physical cash that you're looking at, right? In fact, more often than not, when the transfer happens, you have value sitting somewhere in your bank account. But can you take out that value? For example, if you say you had 40,000 shillings right now in your account and there's no place you can go withdraw that money, how good is it that I can send you the 40,000 shillings and you believe you actually have value in 40,000 shillings? It's still perception, isn't it? So if we build on that whole idea of perception and what happened, then you get to understand how easy it has been to transition from what in international money remittances, what we used to have before dominating was we send you cash, you physically go to a location and collect cash. Because you felt that's the only way I can justify this value, right? I need to have cash in hand. I need to have my cowrie shells.
Very important.
Very important.
Right? I need to have my cowrie shells.
Very important.
So I think where we've gotten to right now in terms of global transfers is global transfers have really moved away from having to receive the physical cash to now having the funds terminating, say, to your wallet, say a mobile wallet, or to your bank account. And the reason behind this also is that, again, that perception needed to be fueled. You needed to satisfy or to legitimize that perception. So how do you legitimize the perception? Is that if I have the 40,000 shillings in my bank account or my phone and I need to purchase something, I don't need to go to the bank to get cash to come and pay. Is when I go to a merchant to purchase something, is that merchant will take my perception of what I have as 40,000 as validity of me having the value of what they think they have, right? So because we were able to sort of satisfy that feeling or that perception, it made cross-border payments very easy to transition from cash to more, I want to say, digital way of sending transfers. And that's what we have here. And now let me just tie this, with a Pan-African solution, is that in Africa, for a very long time, it was much easier for you to move goods. I mean, granted, there are challenges, but it's very easy for you to buy baskets from Okoh, get onto a bus, drive all the way to, I don't know, say Ethiopia, and sell those, those baskets. But then, how easy is it for you to move money from Kenya to Ethiopia? It's not as easy as you might imagine, for two reasons. One, the infrastructure that currently exists in terms of you being able to send money, first of all, is very Western dominated, right? And number two, I am your neighbor, right? So Ethiopians are our neighbors. In fact, they don't need visas. We don't need visas to go there. But I can't go with Kenya shillings and go and trade Ethiopian beer.
Yes.
But it's easy for me to carry
baskets
and go sell in Ethiopia. So we as a continent have perfected, and when I say perfected, have perfected a way of moving money domestically, right? And you can just check this out. A lot of the instant payment solutions and services that exist, most of them are actually in Africa, right? So being able to do peer-to-peer transfer instantly exists in Africa. In fact, yesterday I was having a chat with a friend of mine who's come in from Brazil, and I was asking him about PIX. So PIX is their version of what we have here as IPSL. And
what is IPSL?
So PesaLink, what we have is PesaLink, instant payment. Yeah, so it's the bank instant payment services.
So why is it called an IPS?
No, it's IPSL is a holding company. So IPSL. So when you're on my side, it as IPSL, but generally we know it as PesaLink.
Okay.
Being able to transfer funds, right? So when I was having a chat with him, he lights up to tell me about. So I asked him, tell me how PIX works. He lights up to tell me about how PIX works. Oh, I'm able to send money instantly from my account to your account. He even gives me a scenario of how he was paying rent before, and it used to take 3-4 days, and now I can easily just pay. Or I walk into a merchant and I pay, and this is something new to them.
When did they have this PIX thing?
Like about 2-3 years ago. And he's really excited about it. Like he lights up about it. So he's been in the country, I think, for a month. So he doesn't fully understand how everything works. And I'm like, okay, so we've had M-Pesa for quite some time, and it's instant.
18 years.
We've had PesaLink, which is instant, for quite some time, and and he's like, oh, is it? So how does it work? So we start now. He gets a little bit technical about it. I'm like, wait, hold up. I don't understand the technical bit of it. I understand how it works. And guess what? We've had an instant way of moving money for a very long time, right? But then, so you understand, most countries, especially in Africa, we have all these instant services that we're working on. But then when it comes to the cross-border one, if I need to move money, say, from here to Ghana, or from here to Nigeria, I don't have an instant way of sending money. And I guess that's where the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System came in to try and solve that problem, because it is an instant service that allows you to send money fast in local currency as well as instantly.
Okay.
So how does it work? And then how are you able to handle things like exchange rates? Because the complaint has been, for the longest time that you lose quite. If you're sending huge amounts of money and you're losing something on the exchange rate, then it becomes unfavorable.
Right.
How does that work?
So let's just debunk it and look at how money moves. So globally, money still moves by banks. Banks still move majority of the money, right? So you have so many fintechs coming in to try and provide quick, easy ways of sending money, but money still is moved by banks. Now, a lot of pressure in terms of moving money cross-border has always been on the consumer, right? So if you want to say, like the use case I was giving for Ethiopia, if you want to send money to Ethiopia, you need to come to the bank and purchase dollars. Why? Because the guy in Ethiopia will tell you, I don't have confidence or faith in your Kenya shillings, give me dollars because I can do much more with dollars, right? So what PAPS has come in to do, right, is remove that pressure from the consumer. And tell the consumer, what do you have? You have Kenya shillings. That's what you trade in. That's what you have access to. The guy on the other side needs beer. That's what he trades in. That's what he has access to. So it brings that gap and says, bring your Kenya shillings. I will deliver the payment in Ethiopian beer.
Okay.
Now, because we are not yet there as a continent, and we have to call it as it is, we're not yet there as a continent where we say, my Kenya shillings is worth this much value. Now, it removes pressure from the consumer and puts pressure on the banks. But banks don't have a problem accessing foreign currency. They have a multitude of ways to get foreign currency. So the baseline currency, fun fact, baseline currency for PAPS is actually US dollar, right? But then it means, you don't have to come to the bank and get dollars. Just give me Kenya shillings. The bank will figure out how to get the dollars on the other side and do the conversion from, say, Kenya shilling dollar, then Ethiopian beer. Yeah.
So as we talk about the movement of money, and it is a subject that for a very long time has been domiciled even with policymakers and leaders of African countries. For a fact that even right now, just in the EAC, East Africa Community, there is the aspect of the monetary policy where we want to come around with a single value that works like the euro, So in terms of the monetary policy that is being pushed coming through, what effect would that have on PAPS in making sure that these transactions as well just happen easily?
So, the East Africa, so that will largely solve our problem as East Africa.
Yes.
Right? I don't know whether you know this, there is a service that exists for East Africans called the East African Payment System.
Yes.
So the East African Payment System has tenets that make a lot of sense. For example, it means that, again, from the use case of having to use a dollar, is if I'm paying for goods and services in, say, Uganda, I don't have to look for the dollar to pay for that service. Because Kenya shilling and the Kenya shilling and the Tanzanian shilling and the Ugandan shillings are tradable. I mean, you can walk to Tanzania and actually trade that money, right? But then what that does for us as a block, and I love the fact that you brought in that bit, because now it brings in the conversation about a block. If you look at regional blocks that exist within Africa, so you have the West African Economic zone that allows you to do ZOF-ZAF, right? And then you have the SADC RTGS that allows you to move money either using rands or US dollars. So majority of these places, these regional blocks, have a solution for one currency that they use. So even when they're trading cross-border outside that region, they're able to leverage on the sort of the strength of that regional block's currency. Now, as EAC, if we had one, one currency, the opportunities are just crazy, because then now you're looking at it as one block. So even in terms of, so follow the money. So the money will come in as having one block. But then in terms of negotiating for trade agreements globally, you're negotiating as a block, which my assessment would be if you have the EAC, all the member countries signing up to it, and you have one single currency, it gives you more legitimacy, it gives you a bigger trade block, which means then that you might find a situation where maybe our EAC, let's call it the EAC shilling, an EAC shilling might be would have more value compared to, say, individually as a Kenya shilling. And as a result, means our traders would be able to, say, purchase items cheaper than what they currently have, because you're able to hedge your exchange much stronger if you have more countries backing that one currency.
So paint a picture for us, because usually we talk about these things, and it's great because you had some acronyms here that through CT for a loop.
I love how you stopped me.
Yes. So often will. So if you have any more acronyms, just be ready for the finger to come up, right? But the thing, so paint a picture for us. Somebody is where? What do you want to sell today? We're selling shea butter coming out of Accra.
Yeah.
Okay? And that shea butter is coming to Nairobi. Gone are the days where you're going to have to take the flight, go from Accra to Addis, come to Nairobi, sell your thing, get paid, go back, which is what you've established. Yeah. So what are we doing today that's going to ensure that, and usually the folks in Accra want to see the money before they can send the butter to you. What are we doing, and how are we going about it to ensure that happens in a short period of time, and that goods and services then NASAC gets delivered?
So digitization of that process is number one, right? So I think digitization is a very key component of it. Second is speed at which you push that transaction. And then lastly is being able to security, I guess, let me call it security and transparency of that transaction, and I'll quantify each. So the speed of the transaction is, if I've struck a deal with you for you to send me shea butter, before you release that, before you call the guy at the port, or if you're putting it in a plane, you need to have money in your account, right? So if we've struck the deal between the two of us, you need to see the money in your account almost instantly. So right now, that is possible, both going and coming in. I'm able to send you money instantly. The second thing, I think, is in terms of transparency. In the event that I've sent you funds, and for some reason, I know funds have left. How many times have you experienced this? You've sent somebody money, you are less in value of the money that you've sent.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know that I can say you've been debited. I don't know if that's an acronym, but let's say you've been... Yes, you've been debited.
We understand.
Okay. All right. So you've been debited money from your account.
Credited.
Okay. So you've been debited money from your account, but the recipient has not received funds.
Yes.
Now everyone is usually... It's because money is very emotive, right? So if the funds have not been received, you get jittered. You start getting jittery. I mean, where is the money? I need to find out where the money is. So if there's a way for you to know where exactly the money is, then guess what? You're more at ease, right? In terms of that. So I think those two things, for sure, will go a long way in ensuring that trade happens. Yeah.
You actually raised something very critical in terms of when you're sending your...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Dennis, I'm sorry. I want to know, though, what am I doing?
Oh,
yeah.
So you access. sorry. So you'd be able to access these services on any of your digital channels. So say you have access to internet banking, you have access to mobile banking, or you have access to, say, a mobile wallet, and a mobile wallet service provider is able to provide you with that service. And I say mobile wallet service provider here to mean even because right now we have so many fintechs that are coming up, right? So you can be a customer of a fintech that would offer you such a service. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as we talk about PAPS, there is always the aspect of, fine, I've sent money, the good has arrived and whatever. But as the person who's sent the money as well, I don't want that money to be withdrawn until I get the goods.
Right.
So how do we deal with that, or just deal with the aspect of trust within the PAPS systems to assure me that the good has been sent, you will receive it, the money as well has been delivered? How do you deal with the intricacy? Those ones. That one. Intricacy.
Yes.
In making sure that there's that trust involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think there's no intelligent answer I can give you to that, right? But I will tell you this. If you think about how perhaps people do trade with, say you're buying goods and services goods from China, for example, right now, and you walk into Kamukunji, the guys who are importing some of those things, they'll tell you, the guy will tell you, I need to have money in my account first before I release the goods. Now, as to whether the goods will be released or not, it's out of faith.
Okay.
But part of how I know a lot of traders have been able to answer that question is you have to do due diligence. I mean, you don't just go online, you find a guy who's saying, I sell shea butter from Accra.
Yeah.
And tomorrow you slide on their direct message if it's on social media and you tell them, hey, listen, I want you to ship me 40 tons of shea butter. You don't know who this guy is. You have no contracts in place. So I think a big component of it is having to do due diligence on yourself, for yourself. Because from a payment rail perspective, right, the mandate is very clear. I need to be able to deliver that payment within a couple of seconds, right? Whatever happens outside now is based on you being able to do due diligence on who you're sending or you're transacting from. And more, I think trade is very interesting from remittances, just general remittances if I'm sending money back home. Because that particular element that you bring in trust. So how does this guy know that I've sent funds, they've been held, and they will have to release the goods?
How would you know? Exactly.
I don't have an answer for that.
The currency that I hear you speaking of that actually fuels and motorizes the financial system is trust.
Absolutely.
Because in the absence of trust, then none of these things would actually work.
No.
Now, the question, how exactly does the system guard against something we constantly hear of? It's called money laundering.
Right. So one of the key requirements, right? So imagine the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System as a scheme that everybody needs to join, right? And there are certain rules and regulations that govern that system or that scheme. And one of the things, even from a regulatory standpoint, that governs it is you need to have enough tools in place to ensure that it's called screening. You're able to screen every transaction against prescribed lists that exist for money laundering, or I think they call it counter-terrorism financing or financing of terrorism. So you need to have a system that allows you to do active screening. And the responsibility of screening is not left to PAPS alone. It's for every participant that is on the network. So if you're a bank, for example, say KCB, that is on PAPS. So KCB has demonstrated to PAPS and the regulator that they are able to screen transactions. It is a requirement. And the reason for this is that the responsibility of AML and screening lies with you as an institution. So you can't, for example, say the third party will do it. So you can't rely on PAPS doing it. PAPS is required to show and demonstrate that they can do it. A bank that's originating a transaction needs to demonstrate that they're doing it. And a bank that is receiving needs to also demonstrate that they are also doing the same. Does that answer to some extent?
No. It actually does answer. I wanted to understand the systems that exist in combating this.
Right.
And you've explained it well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the moment in the continent, we have the AFC FTA, which is being pushed by different governments pretty much, and the continent as a whole in making sure that we are able to do business together. But even as we talk about that, there is the need for everybody to be on board on these for us to be able to do business and trade easily together. So what would be that thing that policymakers need to put in place to make sure that the vision of AFC FTA is actually achieved, and that PAPS comes in making sure that it's actually delivered and achieved as well?
I believe there needs to be a more deliberate push in terms of getting first the financial sector brought onto to the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. And because I strongly believe we need to start looking inward as a continent. We need to start focusing on solutions that are made by Africans for Africans. And the only way we can do that is, one, by giving incentives. So, and some of the incentives might not be from a financial perspective. The incentives could be in terms of efficiency, could be in terms of transparency, etc., etc. So that incentive is very important. But then on the other side is so I think we, or most African countries, need to take a bigger leap of faith in terms of adopting some of these things that we have. Even in terms of things like harmonization of entries for, say, things like PAPS, right? Or solutions that exist for Africans, right? I think it's time where Africans or African countries need to be selfish in terms of trying to find solutions that work for them, that are made by them. And when I say made by them, I mean locally grown solutions, because locally grown solutions, more often than not, will address very specific problems that, say, international solutions might not, right? So if you look at, say, legacy systems are coming and tell you they're going to do 6-7 items, but you actually need to consume 2 things. But then you have on the other side a small fintech, or you have a bank that's looking for solutions that just work for them. Let me give an example, right? And just building on that African Continental Free Trade area, is that if you, for example, looked at how a customer would walk into one location, so assuming you're a Pan-African bank, right, and you have a customer who's in country X, let's say, for example, a customer who's in Uganda who's coming to Kenya, right? If we've already harmonized as you know, so those banks have harmonized how they look at their customers. They probably run on the same core banking. But why is it that customer cannot just walk in from that branch? He's a branch, his branch in Uganda can come into a branch in Kenya and just come and collect cash.
Right.
But why do they have to go through a third party? For example, say a card sponsored by a foreign company, come to an ATM and withdraw cash, as opposed to maybe wanting to go directly and do business, come and deposit, etc., right? But so African countries need, and it's not even need, must, I think must should be the one. African countries must start looking at solutions that work for them, built by them, that work for them, right? So you don't have a third party out there looking in and trying to control what you have, because you've given them so much power, so much control over what you have, right? And PAPS is a fantastic one, because for PAPS now, these rules are set by members on that platform. So central banks on that platform, you have central banks on that platform, you have commercial banks, African commercial banks on that platform, and they sit together and say, look, this works for us, this doesn't work for us. And I think that's very, 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 very important.
But who created this PAPS?
So it's created by the African Import and Export Bank, Afrexim Bank. Yeah. So it's a purely, when I say it's a purely African solution, it is a purely African solution.
Do we, especially with the new systems, I imagine, what happened with mobile telephony when we then got to the place whereby you didn't have to, be stuck to a landline or go to a phone booth or whatever those were. And then you got to a place where you could carry it around with you. Yeah. We had not even gotten out of the woods. And then we started to deal with all these other technologies that come along with it. And people had to essentially learn what it meant. Yeah. So in as much as you had the issue of trust, you also had the issue of this new phenomenon where people were used to keeping money in their purse or under their mattress. And then we then moved to a place where you could carry it around in your phone. Yeah. So here we are, and we're saying that where people were used to, because we can't run away from the fact that people used to trek for thousands, a combination to then be able to get, and then we got into vehicles, and then we got into planes and there. But then now we are saying you don't have to move from where you are to have these things done. There's a certain amount of education and information then that needs to pass from one place to another. It took a while for us to grasp the idea that you can actually move this thing and you don't have to go anywhere. But now we are saying that business can be done. Do you think there's enough information going around, there's enough education for people to be comfortable now with this and say we can actually move? Because it's phenomenal what it then would be able to do for business on the continent.
No, I don't think there's enough information that's gone out there. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, right? So we need to spend a little more time educating our businesses in terms of some of the benefits that they get from this. And it's simple things like, now because the service is instant, you don't have to consolidate payments with 3, 4, 5 guys. Now because the service is cost effective, you don't have to consolidate payments with 3, 4, 5 guys to make a payment. You can make the payment as and when you need to. But on paper, when you look at it, fantastic. Practically, being able to convince businesses for them to see this value, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's a responsibility of everyone, right? So it's a responsibility of those who know to educate those who do not know. It's a responsibility of businesses that are currently consuming some of these services to encourage other businesses to be able to come on board and just enjoy some of the services. Yeah.
Okay. Do we find that there's a greater uptake of this mode, and if so, over what time?
Greater uptake, I think slowly, yes. There is, so the thing about, I don't know whether, maybe it's an African thing, right? Where we're not very quick to adopt new things, right? So more often than not, including me, right? So before I try on something new, I'll wait to see, if Dennis has actually started it. So we do a lot of things based on referrals. Maybe because, of the society we're in, that you have to see other people doing it first for you to believe it, or it's just a personal thing, I don't know. But I will say that the uptake, I'll just go back to there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, we're not yet here.
It's interesting because you find it is sad that we have solutions for African problems, yet you find even if I'm doing business today, I will opt on PayPal because I trust PayPal more to be able to deliver. But here now we have a conversation on how then are we able to change the mindset of African traders and African population pretty much to look at PAPS as a solution that understands them, that it's easier to fix the concerns that they have, to be able to trust it more, to be able to move money easier and faster, but then brings the conversation in terms of, if you look at Afro-Exim Bank and what it does with African governments and even the banks across the continent, having that conversation taking center stage would be important. I mean, let's talk about Africa Union giving it the top seat to be able to do trade, because all these countries want to trade together. Right. So just in terms of policy aspects from an African perspective, AU, perhaps that's the direction we should look at?
Absolutely. And I think PAPS has taken such a good route because one of the things that PAPS has done is it's focused first and foremost with AU. So it's very clear that PAPS is an enabler of the African continental free trade area, right? And the way they do it is being able to allow traders and people doing business to move money seamlessly. Now, that from an AU perspective, AU does back that, right? Then you bring it down to now individual countries. Yes. And one of the entry points for PAPS is actually central banks, right? So you sit with the central bank, and the central bank understands what you need to do. And because central bank is a police of all in the entire financial industry, right? So if the central bank has given it legitimacy, then, every other financial institution will take it on. And when a financial institution has owned it because it's been given legitimacy, then guess what? Banks and all financial services have one thing in mind, right? Beyond obviously providing services to their customers, how do we profit from this? And because it makes sense for them from a profit perspective, then it becomes an item that they actively champion for. So it's sort of like a ripple effect. You start at the top. I had a boss who used to tell me, you need to climb the tree from the top. If you climb the tree from the top, then everything else just becomes easier, right?
Right.
I know how you get there, I don't know, but just climb the tree from the top.
Where are you trying to go? To the bottom?
That boss.
Yeah, so...
But the question I have to ask is, everything you say makes perfect sense. But the two questions really, we trade as Africans with other nations more than we trade among ourselves. Europe, Asia, North America. percentages are infinitely higher. Our trade among ourselves is just 15 to 18% of the total trade. But there are hindrances. Look at our road network and logistics, for instance, or rail network. The cost of doing business. There are countries that do not have sufficient energy needs. Just what we call electricity.
Right.
There's power in few places, but not really adequate. Now, if you list all the hindrances that we have before you throw in tariffs and just the dependency on the countries that previously colonized us, a system such as this one cannot really reach its full potential, can it? With all these hindrances that we keep having. You mentioned the AU. Do you think the AU is the right body to come up with an idea of how it is that we can that we can ensure that these hindrances are lowered and that trade becomes more feasible?
You have to start from somewhere, right? And the reason why I say you have to start from somewhere is, first and foremost, it is very important for you to prove the concept. So you prove the concept that, one, trade actually does exist.
It does.
We can actually build this trade.
Yes.
Now, how do you prove, for example, right now, how do you prove that Kenya does trade with country X and Y? Two things. The volume of goods and services that you either export or import. But then more importantly is you follow the money, isn't it? So you know the quantum of business has been done against how much money has come in or how much money has gone out. Now, if you provide, and I strongly believe in this, if you provide a service such as PAPS that allows people to just move money, guess what? Just because, and I'm not taking a side here, there are no, like say AU has not maybe provided a solution or a service of such nature, just because that is not there doesn't mean customers are not doing it.
They are, but they're limited because in the absence of deliberate, very, very deliberate policy implementations that make these things possible.
Right.
Take, for instance, the insecurity that we keep talking about in this continent. It's a massive deterrent to any of these things that we speak of. Okay?
Sure.
If you look at just the competing economic blocks that we have, and the overlapping tariffs and all these things. See, the AU is supposed to bring about some of these things, meaning this unification you speak of, what you are talking about forms an integral part of how all these things can come together. Platforms that can actually work on the continent. That's a tick. But these other areas, we look at just the East African community. We make progress, and then we suddenly stop.
Yeah.
And suddenly we are squabbling about eggs and potatoes and maize. Suddenly.
Yeah.
Now, all I'm saying is, in the absence of some of the fundamentals that bedevil this continent, do you really think that justice will be done for a system such as the one that you're talking about?
Absolutely. And this is why I strongly believe in this, right? And I'll quantify my answer. And when I say you have to start from somewhere, is because you will list 5, 7, 10 items that are a challenge. But the reality is this. Even with those barriers that exist, if I'm able to move money, practical, if I'm selling you this coffee mug, right? You absolutely love it. But I tell you, by the time I give you this coffee mug, I have to take it outside, it comes back, you come and get it. But you've seen value in this coffee mug. Believe me, you'll try and get the coffee mug, isn't it? But then, if we figure out a way of you being able to get it, I've already told you all the barriers that exist in place for you to be able to get this coffee mug, because you've seen value in the coffee mug. But I cannot give you, or you cannot transfer value to me for this coffee mug, then it's as good as done. So first and foremost, being able to move money is very, very important. Now that creates an opportunity for traders and customers to be able to see new markets that previously did not exist. And the quantum of the business that comes in as a factor of being able to move money puts pressure directly into those governments, put pressure directly into the financial services or the infrastructure that exists to be able to enable trade to flourish. Because remember, follow the money, right? As long as there's a profit to be made, people will find a way to make things easier for them. That is a fact, right? That's why, even with the issues that exist between East Africa, is every now and then, I think it keeps changing. Uganda, one time, is our biggest trade partner, and then at another time, it's not our biggest trade partner. But there are challenges, there are barriers that exist. But guess what? Every time we keep pushing that boundary, because ultimately, the people who are making money off this trade will put enough pressure on the systems that exist to ensure that it is efficient.
Okay, yeah. So if we you talk about having to use local institutions, banking institutions to be able to have this done. Let's bring it home, and you look at then institutions that have covered the region, KCB being one of them, in Kenya, in South Sudan, in Rwanda, and then maybe partnering with others. How then do you see that it works from me, merchant, who is now trying to make a payment across the continent? I have to go through that. Do we see that now institutions, are opening up so that you can actually have that as one of the things that you do? Because it's not just merchant to merchant, like you said. There has to be an intermediary,
right?
Isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, financial institutions such as KCB have done a fantastic job at enabling that environment, right? Because you see, they have, if you imagine the regional bank that KCB has, it has visibility over merchants and customers that exist, say, in Uganda. It also has visibility of merchants and customers that exist in Kenya, and it acts as the single source or the intermediary where you're able to link this to, right? And there are numerous programs that KCB, for example, does to ensure that you're able to link merchants on this side, on this other side. And as a result of that, right, being able to provide as well, say, working capital financing to be able to do business on the other side and vice versa. I mean, it's profit. At the end of the day, they're all looking at how do we make money and how do we ensure our customers are happy and how do we grow this business. So if you look at that context and the pressure that does to economies is, listen, we know we have, say, 40,000 merchants on this side who are doing business with 40,000 merchants on this side. And this is a quantum of business that they're doing. It becomes an easier conversation to have, even with the government, and say, look, there's so many barriers that exist in being able to assist our customers to do this. Can we lack some of these barriers? Are we able to sit down and have a conversation around, is there, for example, import tariffs that are really affecting the quantum of business these customers are doing?
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine the phenomenal things that we'd then be able to do.
Yeah.
We keep talking about this 1.3 billion people on the continent, and you don't even have to then worry about, can we make money from continent to continent? The unbelievable things that we can do within the borders of Africa, just picking up on this, seems in my mind, it's mind-blowing.
It is.
Why? And
Given
do you
our
think
natural resources and human resource, the things that would be, believe me, there is no continent that speaks to the future like this one.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, very quickly, do you think we're grasping enough of the potential, or do you think that we then have a hunger to be able to then, fire up that potential?
We have the hunger for it, especially this generation that's coming into the entrepreneur generation that's coming into the market.
Yeah.
They know what their peers are doing in other markets, right? And they're the ones who are actively pushing for this sort of this integration of these solutions that are purely African.
Right.
Yeah.
Edward Nakitare, international money transfer expert. Definitely a conversation that was worth having this morning. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Asante Sana. As we continue to look at those, we look here in the country, of course, and then we look beyond. We talk about the continent at every turn that we can get. And when we look at things whereby we talk about them on a domiciled nature, we can see how they can then spread towards, the rest of the continent and what then there lies in terms of potential, in terms of what we do. And those are the conversations that we have here every day. And it's good for us to look into those realities.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.